Welcome to another episode of In the Eyes of Truth, English edition. Uh, Today we have our guest, a new guest, Charles Bausman. He is a journalist here in Russia. He writes on a Substack on moving to Russia. Also is a publisher of Russian Insider, which I've read many times, but it's the first time I'm meeting with Charles, and Russian Faith. So,
Why, hello there. Come hither, boys and girls, and hear the magical tale of the magic monetary theory. That's right. You no longer have to worry about all the pesky gold and silver to buy what you want. Just print, print, print. And when Marco Polo traveled to ancient China in the 1200s, the Mongol Khans of China showed him their magic monetary theory, where they had pure fiat paper money, and they could just print whatever they needed for whatever they wanted to buy. But alas, even that story had a dark ending. For the magic monetary theory unleashed the twin beasts, the tidal wave of debt ridden by the beast of inflation. And when Marco Polo returned to China 20 years later, there were no Mongol Khans of China anymore. China had just gone through a vicious civil war that was sponsored by a total economic collapse. Let's fast forward 800 years. And the modern monetary theory is all the rage in the Western leadership. That's right, you no longer have to worry about debt. Debt no longer matters. No, just print, print, print all you need. But yet, the twin beasts are back. The tsunami of debt swallows up whole nations, causing defaults, causing collapses in currency, destroying people, destroying their lives. The beast of inflation swallows up your hard-earned wealth. The products that cost $126 back in 22 now cost well over $400 in 24. That's right, hyperinflation is here. What do you do to save your hard-earned wealth? Where do you go? You go to gold, not paper gold, physical gold. And you don't keep that gold in the United States, where in 1932 the government confiscated gold. It'll do it again. You don't keep it in Western Europe that's collapsing before our very eyes. Where do you go? What do? You come to exitstrategy.world, the company that's going to help you find the safe haven for your gold and your well-being. Exitstrategy.world, the saviors in this dark fairy tale.
is it, I'm getting over a cold, so pardon the coughing. Charles, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you came to Russia?
Yeah, well, I've got a somewhat exotic story why I'm here this time because I'm actually a January 6th refugee.
Oh,
Um, as a
wow.
journalist, I was inside the Capitol building in Washington during that protest, and um, I thought it was the biggest scoop of my life. It was the biggest scoop of my life, actually. And I was working with Russian TV at the time, and I was live on air, from the site, like broadcasting like original footage and everything like that. And then they started arresting people, and I realized that with my Russia Insider and Russia connections and stuff, I just had a target on my back. So me and the family hopped a plane and came to Moscow as soon as we could. And thank God we did, because they've been treating those um, January 6th people very, very badly.
A little
No due
prisoner.
process. Yeah, I mean, really, really kind of brutal stuff, treating them like terrorists. And um, yeah, so we've been here since then. It's about 3.5 years now, praying for Trump to get back in so we can go back, but having an incredibly fun time in Moscow all the same, because uh, uh, I lived here for, oh, just forever. I first came in 1980. Well, I lived here first as a child because my dad was the bureau chief at the Associated Press,
Oh, okay.
and which is the news age,
Mm-hmm.
one of the major news agencies. And then uh, studied Russian in college. I came back on an exchange program one summer in 1986. So I got to see the end of the USSR. Came back a year later and got a job with American TV, and it was super exciting. And anyway, I've been back and forth ever since then, and it's a total. I spent most of my life in Russia. Actually, I speak fluent Russian, and have traveled, all over the place. Worked in business also. Did a few years in journalism, and decided that the pay wasn't very good. And yeah, and my dad always said, "Oh, you don't want to be a journalist. They don't pay anything." So worked in business and finance, private equity, and then in the summer of 2014, the first Ukraine conflict started, and our financing totally dried up. I mean, there was just nothing happening. Nobody wanted to invest in Russia. It looked like there was going to be a major war breaking out. Um, uh, and um, and so I had plenty of time on my hands, and I said, you know what, I'm going to start a website. And I did this together with some expat friends, and we wanted to tell the world that we thought that Russia was on the right side at the time, and that the Western media was lying. And I thought this was going to be a website like a vanity project, like 200 of my friends and relatives would read it. It would be something that we could just blow off some steam, basically. And it got super popular. I mean, it just completely exploded, and it was just the right thing at the right time. And there was nobody in Russia telling like the Russian side of the story, except for RT, which people maybe dismissed in a way because they thought it was state-sponsored propaganda or something. And we were much more sort of edgy and pushing limits and calling a spade, and it really took off. And it got so big that I realized it was worth pursuing. So I got back into journalism, and since then I've just been a journalist.
I'll correct
And
you.
so,
There was somebody else told the story. I was doing it, but it was a vanity project blog with a couple hundred people on it.
and it's funny. Um, uh, it's just been a huge amount of fun. Like getting back into journalism has just been fantastic, and it's been super interesting. Um, yeah, so there we are.
Well, did you watch the videos that and you were on site, so you can collaborate this, I guess, a lot better. Uh, Tucker Carlson had some videos that he showed from inside the building, Capitolia,
Right,
that were off of the security cameras that one of the Republican senators gave him. And because
right.
the official story is the crowd burst in, trampled one of the cops to death, just marched through, vandalizing and all this other stuff. And then it shows the video, that cop that's supposed he died. I don't know how he died. Supposedly the crowd crushed him, but there he is walking, opening the doors, people walking behind him like tourists, like whoa, wow, wow, not this raging mob. And he's opening the doors up to all the officers, and they're letting them in, take photos. And it's
Yeah.
day and night compared to what the official line is.
No, it was very much like that. I mean, I didn't fight my way in. I walked in with, I was just off to the side, so I just walked up from the side. There was some serious fighting going on down at the bottom, at the sort of the front of the Capitol. But once the crowd had reached the building, they opened the doors and let people in, and there were cops standing around. Um, but it did, it wasn't entirely peaceful, I would say, and
Mhm.
um, it was a very interesting thing. But that story of the cop being killed by the crowd, that's not true. He died a couple days later of some sort of heart complications or something. Had nothing to do with injuries or something that he experienced on that day. And the one thing that's definitely true about that is that that was a completely, it was just full of feds, and it was the feds who first attacked the building and encouraged the crowd to go in. So it was really, a false flag, almost like an
Yeah.
op. And they knew in advance there was going to be a big crowd, and they jammed it full of the kind of people who would charge in, and then they took the lead. Yeah, so that was very much an operation to discredit Trump, and it
There
worked.
was even an activist from BLM, a major activist who was identified by photos, who wasn't charged. He was getting the crowd going in there. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah,
and of course, no arrests because who he's working for.
exactly,
And he had the MAG
exactly.
hat on. And you've
So
heard,
it's going
excuse
to
me.
be really interesting when you know, I personally believe that Trump is going to get in. I'm a political analyst mostly, so
Mhm.
I like follow this stuff very closely, and um, I think he'll probably win like decisively, so that they can't falsify it, and then he'll be able to overcome any efforts they try and make to prevent him from being inaugurated. And then when he gets in, I think he's gonna do a serious investigation of that whole situation, and it's gonna be ugly. I mean, they're gonna reveal all the dirty tricks that were going on.
You really think they're not gonna steal the elections? The reason I'm saying is, uh, nothing's changed since 2020. I mean, really, nothing. Same electronic voting blocks that have no paper trails. Uh, I'm pretty sure the same dead are gonna climb out of the graves just one more time to vote Democrat. What's changed? Well, the only thing is,
Well,
you don't have quarantine going on.
yeah, I'll tell you a few things have changed. So the Republicans have really been, fighting in the courts to limit the amount of mail-in ballots where most of the fraud occurred. And they've really tightened the control of that. And basically, this time they're ready. All right. So in 2020, they weren't expecting this stuff, and they weren't prepared, and they didn't know how to react. And then January 6th happened. This time they know all the tricks, and yeah, there's still going to be fraud, but I think Trump's support is so decisive that the amount of fraud that they're going to be able to muster is not going to be able to overcome it. You know.
You know, if you haven't heard, there's been a third attempt on Trump's life. Right outside his rally, they found a car jam-packed with explosives. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I saw that briefly on Twitter, able to get the details on it, and then there's now it looks like another Middle East war is starting, so
yeah,
that kind of overtook that. Um, so yeah, I don't know what the story is on that, but I did see a tweet saying actually then they figured out that these explosives were supposed to be there. Police put them there to train the explosive sniffing dogs. I don't know. I just don't know the details. I haven't seen the story.
that's an odd place to put the explosives to train the dogs at the rally. Not before the rally. Hey, let's train the dogs in the parking lot. Now let's put the explosives at the rally, and then we can train how to handle the mass casualty event after we accidentally blow it up. um,
Yeah. No,
you,
it does. It's very suspicious.
you know what? Why? I don't know. I don't think they're going to let Trump in for the simple reason. If you look at the special services, America has what 13 spy agencies. Um,
Right.
the chiefs of those agencies, I mean, they betrayed their commander in chief. They were working for the Democratic Party while Trump was president, actively undermining their boss. And Trump's already said, when I come, I'm going to clean them all out. Well, these guys are
Right.
looking at, they're not looking at the end of their career. They're looking at jail time.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
the retribution could be very, very serious. But honestly, these guys, they don't have a lot of cards left to play. I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, yeah, they made some bad choices. They turned out to be, traitors and scumbags. Um, but at the time, it seemed like the right thing to do because it,
I'm sure.
you know, promoted their career and they had incentives to do that. I don't see how they get out of this, honestly.
Well,
I mean,
if Trump doesn't live long enough to get the job done, they get out of it.
well, no, because um, here's I think they don't like killing Trump is not actually a good option for them because then they just make a martyr of it, right? And the country would be infuriated, and obviously the finger pointing would be at the Democrats, Kamala, and so on and so forth, the deep state. And I think the Republicans then would nominate somebody else, and the person they probably nominate is Vance. They don't have to make him the candidate, but they probably would because public opinion would say, look, this is the guy Trump picked. Trump knew that he might be in danger in some way, and we should support him. And Vance has got his own sort of super support system to get him in, like Tucker Carlson and big Silicon Valley money and so on. And so I think a lot of people would say, well, the candidate should be Vance, right? Well, that's not any better for the deep state. In fact, it might be worse because the kind of things Vance has been saying also suggests that he's intent on really, really cleaning up and changing a lot of things. And I got to say, like this whole team that Trump wants to bring in, like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK and Vivek and all these people, the talk is incredibly compelling right now. I mean, if those people get in and are given appointments in the administration, it could be a very, very good thing for America. But what's interesting is that obviously, if Kamala wins or gets installed, I should say, she, there are going to be a flood of people wanting to move to Russia, right? But if Trump wins, I still think there's going to be a substantial number of people who want to do that, simply because I believe that he will normalize relations with Russia. I think he will end the Ukraine war. I think he'll give Russia a deal that they, in terms that Russia finds satisfactory. He'll drop the sanctions, and there'll be flights, and you'll be able to transfer money and all this. Like a big reason why people sort of wonder about moving to Russia right now is like, well, how do I get my money over there? And am I going to get harassed by U.S. authorities? And what if I'm getting a pension or some payments in America? Or I want to stay in touch with my relatives. Am I going to get cut off forever? I think once there's normal communication and travel and economic relations between these two countries, a lot of Americans are just going to come here because there's so much opportunity, and Russia isn't going to be as demonized anymore by the government.
What surprises me, well, Germans are moving, but first of all, Russian Germans who moved in the 90s and 2000s. What surprised me is the English are still, well, there's been a movement up in Scotland. Family started, I think they had some like 17 families in the last month, which it really isn't that much if you think about it. It's a drop in the bucket. But the English with money they're not moving. Even though you got, I'm not even talking just to Russia in general. Even you got Steimer in there, who's obviously gonna fleece them to the last penny. It's a police state, absolute police state, but they're staying in place, complaining about it.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing. So I think what happens in Europe is extremely derivative of what happens in America, right? So I think if Trump gets in and he really implements his agenda, I think the whole European sort of establishment is going to fall. They're going to be on the run. Their people are furious at them. It's just going to be a bloodbath, right? And there could be like a major sort of changing of the guard in Europe, and all those bums get tossed out. Um, if Kamala comes in, then I think Europeans are really going to panic. I think it's going to be like Americans. They're going to be like, you know what? This is already getting really, really scary, and we want to get the hell out. Um, so, so yeah, I think it's so funny. It's just such a cliche, but everything hinges on November, basically, and what happens for the 3 or 4 months after November. It's just incredible how pivotal this election is, and how much it's going to influence like the history of the coming years. It's it takes your breath away, really. We're at this like complete pivot point.
Yeah, maybe the U.S. needs to give up on this whole idea of world hegemony and calm down, be a regional power like other regional powers, and because the American people don't get anything out of this. The upper class gets a lot out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And but that's exactly what they're talking about doing. This is what's so interesting is that uh, Trump's proxies, I mean, there's these people I mentioned before who are, supposedly going to come in and have key jobs in the administration. They're saying this very much out loud. They're saying, I mean, RFK's position on all this was, I'm going to close if I get to be president, I'll close all the bases. I'll bring all the soldiers home. Um, and and him and Vivek and Tucker and Tulsi, they're all saying the same thing. Like, this is what we want to do, and that's why we signed up. And we talked to Trump to see if he would really, allow us to do that, and he said yes. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
As somebody who served in quite a few years, 11, not counting my cadet years. Yeah, yeah, I love, I just adore the armchair keyboard patriotism. They're fighting for our freedoms. I'm sorry. What the frick did America's freedoms get lost in Afghanistan or in Syria, in the oil fields of Syria and in Iraq? Did they just take a road cruise somewhere and, oh, we're in Iraq, come save us? I mean, and people believe this crap.
No, it's late stage like corruption and decline. It reminds me so much. I was I got to see the end of the Soviet Union. I was here then when that happened, and it's what's going on in the West is so familiar, and it reminds me so much of that. And um, there's so many of the same sort of symptoms, like a very elderly establishment that's completely out of touch with the people, who just lying through their teeth like morning till night. The media is just completely lying. Everybody on the street thinks, the media is a joke and don't take it seriously. People making fun of the government. It's just so similar. It's just so similar.
You've
And
jumped
what's
the shark.
interesting is
I'm sorry.
in America, they've lost control of the
Yeah,
media. At least in
yeah.
the Soviet Union, they controlled the media right up until the end, right? In America, I mean, how could you not be waking up at this point? And that's, I think, part of the reason why I think Trump's going to get in, because, I mean, they talk all the time about the mainstream lying media. Well, guess what? Nobody watches them anymore, or very few people do, or mostly elderly people,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
young people aren't buying.
They say that you've jumped the shark when you become the butt of memes. So
Yeah,
yeah, the mainstream media is memes. It's nothing more. That was
yeah.
the yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible to watch, and it's not just that BS value signaling patriotism that has nothing to do with real patriotism. It's also the support the troops. Well, if you want to support the troops, don't get them killed and doing stupid crap that doesn't help the country any. Take them home.
Absolutely.
That's supporting the troops.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel so badly for American military over the last 30 years. They've just been just been abused. They've
Oh
been
yeah.
abused. Um, you know, the rank and file, and a lot of the officers too.
Oh yeah.
It's bad. It's bad.
And speaking of elections, I was in Macedonia, so this is 96. Voted, right? So we voted on the day of the elections, November 5th.
Mhm.
Um, and then they sent off the ballots that arrived 2 weeks later in the US. Oh,
Mhm.
too late to count. That's Clinton's little doing. Check mark, we let them vote. You know?
Right,
So
right.
you can't say we didn't let you vote. Not that your vote matters any, because damn it, you're all conservative. So yeah, little games, little fun games like that. But yeah, it was. I mean, all these deployments were insane because just all pointless. Yeah, but so you're here for 3 years, and then you're planning if Trump comes back, you're planning on heading back to the U.S.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. I, I'm completely bicultural, right? So
Hmm.
I feel so at home here. I've spent, you know, 30 plus years here, probably in total since as an adult. Um, I have a lot of Russian friends. I know my way around super well. I could easily live here. Like if somebody told me, "Hey, you're gonna have to stay in Russia your whole life, you can never leave," I'd be like, "Fine, great place to be." Um, but I do have this feeling that when my country is in trouble and my country needs to be, needs all hands on deck to try and get it going in the right direction again, it would be a little bit irresponsible of me to sit here and enjoy my life in Russia. Um, and and so that's why, even if it was dangerous, even if it was, hardship, even if it was um, better to be in Russia, for personal selfish reasons. Um, if I could, if it wasn't too dangerous, because I have a wife and children and two small children, um, I, I would go. I would go and fight because I'm a fighter, basically.
Well, what would you
It's a
say
mentality.
to
So
what
it's
would
a
you
sense of
say?
social
Mhm.
responsibility, civic
Right, right.
responsibility. I want to try and help.
Well, what would you say to people considering Russia or considering that? Because a lot of Americans. I'll give a quick example. I was on Facebook, VPN on Facebook, and I commented something on one of these pro-Ukrainian BS articles, and a guy from Minnesota called me. Listen, you commie. I'm like, geez, I know news travels slow over there, but by the way, I'm a free market monarchist,
Right.
Christian monarchist. But
I'm a monarchist too. I'm glad to hear that.
yeah,
That's a good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Orthodox monarchy, that's the way to go.
Exactly, exactly. But that's still a very poorly understood subject for Americans.
Oh yeah.
I don't think they're not gonna. It's gonna be a while before people learn enough about monarchy to take it seriously. Um,
Well, hell,
but
I
what
mean,
what would I say to Americans about
there- mhm.
moving to Russia, living in Russia? It's very interesting. I started this series on Substack, writing about why one should move to Russia. And
Mhm.
you have all this stuff kind of in your head, but you've never like articulated it. You've never like made a list on paper and tried to lay it all out and organize it in a way that you could write about it. So I only started doing this seriously over the last month or so. And one thing that I realized that I hadn't really realized as much before was just how much opportunity there is here. You know, I mean, this is a kind of like a Klondike situation, like a California gold rush. I mean, people who come here and get in on the ground floor and uh, build businesses or just have family lives or salary jobs or whatever, they're going to get in on a country that is just chugging along really fast and doing extremely well and stands to benefit so much from the coming decades. I mean, my specialty is as a journalist, I was always really interested in history, and I studied history in college. I've loved history my whole life, so I know a lot of Russian history, right? And the true story of Russia is that this country was on an incredible trajectory throughout the 19th century. It was like
Mhm.
it wasn't in any way inferior to America. You know, you talk about how like what a miraculous country America was in the 19th century. I mean, economically, the way it just created wealth like nobody had ever created before. Well, exactly the same thing was happening in Russia for
Mhm.
many of the same reasons. It was this giant resource-rich country, and had only upwards to go. And what happened? And then the revolution happened, and the 70 years of communism, and that actually really slowed Russia down. That
Yes,
really
yes.
like you know it was a major speed bump, and the war and everything, and it really it didn't allow Russia to realize the potential that it definitely had, leading up to 1917. So now that Russia's getting back on track, it's going to make up lost ground, and it's just going to explode. I mean, when you think, Putin went to, he had that economic conference in Vladivostok a couple of
Hmm.
weeks ago, um, with the vice president of China there and the president of it was Malaysia, and top representatives from all the Asian booming
Including
economies,
Japanese that came in.
places like that's interesting. I didn't know the Japanese one, but
Came
like
in real
the
quiet, didn't announce the company. I know a journalist who was there was telling me about it. Groups of Japanese.
yeah, the Vietnamese, the Indonesians.
Hmm.
I mean, all
Hmm.
these like booming places, right? And the fact that Russia has a border with them and a sea coast and trade and all these and can supply energy into that. I mean, the amount of investment that's going to happen out there is just insane. It's
Oh yeah.
insane, and it's like unrealized, right? It hasn't happened.
Yep.
So I think people don't realize they think of Russia as hmm, maybe maybe they not so developed economically, maybe not so wealthy, a country that's had a lot of problems for as long as I can remember, ever since they were kids, and they might think, it's probably going to chug along like that, you know, for the rest of our life. Um, having sort of substandard growth and substandard maybe quality of life. And I'm starting to realize that that's not true. This place is booming. It's
Yep.
booming,
Yep.
and it's gonna unless something cataclysmic happens, it's gonna boom, boom, boom like for the next 50, 100 years. And what they end up accomplishing here might be so extraordinary that people will talk about it for centuries afterwards. Like that was absolutely amazing.
Yep. Yep. Have you ever read have you ever heard of a historian called Anthony Sutton? That's in your
Yes,
BS9.
I have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
read
sure.
his first book. It's absolutely his books are absolutely dry. They're archival historical books, absolutely dry, but very interesting. His first book is Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, and the second book is Wall Street and the Nazis. And it lays out in detail who was working for whom, this whole web of how they were supporting the communists, the Bolsheviks. Basically, without Wall Street, the Bolshevik Revolution wouldn't have happened. I mean, it would have happened, but the PR was run by Wall Street. They were bringing Swedish bankers to substitute the Russian bankers. I mean, the money they were pouring into it. And in his indexes, he's got a quote from a congressional hearing where the Secretary of State or of the yeah, Department of State, yeah, so he's meeting with the congressional committee, and the congressional committee officially recognized the White Russian side, uh,
Mhm.
and he's like, no, we need to recognize the Bolsheviks. And the quote goes from one of the members of Congress. So what you're saying is we should recognize the Bolsheviks because if they come to power, they will break Russia's or they will restrain Russia's growth for 70 years. Like, yes, that's why we need to we need to back them. So it's
Right.
just, I mean, it's a very interesting book. It's quite worth reading.
Yeah, I've never read his books, but I know of his arguments. I've heard, he's a well-known historian.
Very
Um,
worth reading, believe me. Opens up a lot of cans of worms.
yeah, yeah,
That's one of the things he also talks about in one of his interviews from the 80s. He said, Russia wasn't agrarian. I mean, it was agrarian to some degree, but it was very industrialized. And he's like, and I know that because he used to work in the Hoover Institute, even though he was an English professor that came to the U.S. But he worked in the Hoover Institute. He's like, we've got boxes like this, like huge boxes of photographs. So, I mean, think about when this was done. Photographs that were taken by State Department people in Russia right after the revolution for the American oligarchs who ran the Soviet industry in the first, third, and fourth 5-year plans to see what they were going to get, what kind of industry they were getting. It's all these manufacturing plants.
yeah, yeah. No, it was an incredibly wealthy and successful economy, and that's actually why, it's why they had to take it down.
Hmm.
And it wasn't so much in my opinion, it wasn't the Americans so much, because they were kind of far away, but it was very much the British at that point, who were basically controlled by already at that time by Jewish bankers. So it was a very sort of Jewish thing. But the British, Russia was the British Empire's main competitor.
Yes, yes.
And Russia was, as World War I progressed, Russia was in a position to just clean up. I mean, they were on the winning side. Their side was winning, and part of the deal was that they would get Constantinople. That's the deal they made with the British Empire. And if Russia got Constantinople, well, then they'd be unstoppable. Then they'd just be like, the superpower, And so the British were like, we got to take this out. We got to stop this. If we don't, we're going to have a major competitor on our hands. And so they engineered that revolution, and it was a classic color revolution
Oh yeah.
with decades of subversion going on leading up to it, which is, and it's also so similar to what's happening now in America.
Yes.
I mean, America has basically been subjected to decades of subversion, like
Yes.
starting after World War II. And
Charles,
it's
I'm sorry I have to interrupt. We're almost out of time.
okay.
It's flown by so fast. Want to thank everybody who joined us.
Wow, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to promise that I'll get Charles back in again because there's so much left to talk about. Thank you for joining us. Charles, thank you for joining us also.
Stas, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure's all mine, believe me. And
All
we'll
right.
maybe next week if you have some time.
Yeah, let's do it again. This is fun.